the library! Stop! Where is that nincompoop? Disappears right after his Sonic video, right when we're on the cusp of the 200th episode! No matter, I have a stopgap while he drags his fat ass home. Holographic review simulation. Commence! The time has finally come to atone for the sins of my past. And also to play some softballs before number 200 rolls around. When this YouTube channel started about 10 years ago, I was a student in college, a 2-hour drive away from home with no car, and without consistent access to any kind of recording hardware. In retrospect, might not have been a good idea to try and make a gaming channel when you can't record yourself gaming. As such, there were a few times in my early YouTube career where I got desperate to keep up the flow of content with no real means of producing any, and I turned to copying zero punctuation. I've never been proud of this, and I've already gone back and redone the biggest screw-up of the early days, Batman Begins, which I had initially reviewed based on flawed memories of a Blockbuster rental, but now, 10 years later and about to hit my 200th episode, I think it's time to go back and properly fix the other two rip-off reviews that I did back then, Thor God of Thunder and Captain America Super Soldier, both for the Wii. Early MCU adaptations produced by Sega in the twilight years of cheap movie license games. Fine, the twilight of cheap movie license games that people actually gave a crap about. Oh, would you just shut up? Point is, Thor God of Thunder on the Wii, with real footage this time. The game begins with Loki narrating about how Asgard has a ton of enemies, the city is protected by Odin and Heimdall, and how only a truly nefarious and brilliant plan could allow some of Asgard's enemies to breach the city and attack. We then cut to a bunch of frost giants from the realm of Jotunheim attacking Asgard, and Thor must intervene. Okay, why does the game's introduction not have a single word explaining who Thor is, or how all this sci-fi Norse mythology stuff works? They just expect you to have already watched the movie to have any idea who these people are. If you haven't, well, here's the gist. Thor's a good guy, but an asshole. His brother Loki's a secret bad guy that nobody knows is an asshole. Their dad Odin's a king and also an insane asshole. And they all live in a floating golden castle in space, kind of vaguely ruling or guarding over 9 planets, several of which think they're all assholes. Also, this is supposed to take place before the Thor movie, which will not make sense on several levels that we'll get to as we go along, starting with how in the movie Odin has a truce with the Frost Giants that he doesn't want broken over a misunderstanding. I think that ship has sailed, given that a full army of them are actively invading your planet! The game's frame rates are awful. Even from the first level of the game, it feels like about 2/3 of the frames are missing, with all the animations being jittery and butt-fugly to look at. The game hangs so badly every time it moves into any kind of cutscene or QuickTime event with the in-game models, you're constantly afraid that this thing is going to crash.
Face me, Asgardian, if you dare.
Enough!
Jeez, I don't even get as small as these frame rates do.
Thor is a beat-em-up game. You mash A for quick attacks, swing the remote for 2 different kinds of heavy attacks, and swing it upward for uppercuts. You also swing the remote to throw Thor's hammer in a circle and for certain hits in a combo, and between lackluster motion detection and the same input doing so many things, it's difficult to get Thor to launch the specific attack that you want on command. On the bright side, you won't be wasting inputs trying to do the uppercut. Even when it works, it barely works, since enemies almost always just fall right out of it. You can hold Z to block, hold C to throw your hammer, and as the game goes on you can hold minus or plus to strike enemies with lightning or trap them in wind currents using the Wii Remote's pointer. Holding down and shaking the remote also lets you summon lightning strikes on groups of enemies or supercharge your hammer, all of which uses Odin Force energy that replenishes as you kill enemies. Honestly, it's a pretty good combat system, with several attack options making great use of Thor's powers. The problem is the design of the enemies and combat encounters. Or should I say, the lack thereof. The bulk of the game's combat boils down to button-mashing waves of basic cannon fodder enemies to death with no further strategy or nuance. I think there are supposed to be some special enemies that teleport or have big swords you need to parry, but the honest truth is the only difference you'll ever notice in enemies is the big ones have more health and you'll need a few extra heavy attacks to hold them off. Some enemies fly. You huck some lightning or chuck a hammer in their face and they go down. A few of the enemies shoot. You just block their shots to reflect them or huck some more lightning and it kills them.
It especially doesn't help that the lightning move basically stuns enemies to keep them off your back for very little energy usage, and if you get a combo of 50 hits, which you will, you can launch a red lightning field nuke move that just wipes out the entire group for you. Mashing buttons until you can trigger the super move is an extremely viable tactic for most brawls. You get upgrades as you play, but the vast bulk of them are so insanely specifically targeted that they're friggin' useless. I beelined for the 2 additional rune slots, and it didn't matter for shit what I spent my upgrades on after that. You can find runes to equip for swappable buffs, and once I found runes that replenish your health and energy with every melee hit, I never had to worry about combat again outside of boss battles. Yeah, I was playing on normal and the game has a hard and unlockable Ragnarok difficulty, but given that the game's only conceit to a difficulty curve is that later enemies have more health, I doubt cranking up the difficulty would have made the game much better. The whole game is just pretty much the same fight over and over again. Every now and then enemies spawn indefinitely until you take out something in the environment, but that's rare. Like in the very first level where I sat on ass killing endless enemies until I found out there were 2 interactive objects off screen that I was missing. I could have sworn that I just played this game a few weeks ago when it was called Sonic Unleashed, only take out the stupid-ass slow platforming as the werehog and ratchet up the pace. The game moves at a decent speed to where I wasn't really bored, although that's probably because this thing only clocks in at 4 hours long, while its high-def big brother clocks in at 12! That would have been intolerable! As advertised on the box, the game has flying levels that are exclusive to the Wii version. A whole 2 of them! Yeah, take a note from Batman Begins and have exactly 2 special levels just so you can advertise them as plural. These levels are fine, but each is only about 3 to 4 minutes long of mashing A to lightning strike everything in sight. And given how Thor repeatedly kills with a few lightning blasts whole squads of mini-bosses that normally take tons of hits to put down, apparently the rat bastard is pulling his punches to make his game longer. Thor repels the Frost Giant invasion, but his friend Sif, that's Jamie Alexander's character, is killed in the process. Thor is naturally pissed at this and thus sets out to commit genocide in her name. Yeah, Loki tells Thor that there's a super weapon buried on Jotunheim that'll wipe out the Frost Giants, and our brave hero proceeds to invade their homeworld, murder probably hundreds of Frost Giants, and hunt for a weapon to exterminate their entire species because one friend died. And the killer is, she didn't even stay dead. Odin gives Thor a big speech about how Sif died a glorious death and is going to Viking heaven or whatever, and then somehow magics her back to life the instant that Thor leaves. Dumbass, why didn't you just do that in the first place? Did you not know what to get Thor for his birthday and thought waiting to revive his dead friend would make a good present? And furthermore, Odin can magic a random warrior woman back to life on a whim, but not his frickin' wife when she's killed in the next movie? They recycle a boss fight with a frost giant in a big armor suit 3 friggin' times. And often these bosses will just shrug off your hits for no apparent explanation. I don't know why the game tells you to use the powered hammer to flush all your energy down the toilet for melee hits that the boss will often just ignore. It's probably the single worst way to fight them. And the third time you fight this boss, it's accompanied by respawning damage sponges. I'll just spend a few upgrades to extend my health bar. Surely that'll make the combat easy. That's it! I'm pretty sure that's less than a single hit! Eventually you fight the Frost Giant's leader Ymir, and the fight is only hard because the game's detection on motion control quick time events feel so lousy that I have to do almost all of them twice to get them to count. Oh, and there are brief flying segments during the fight with Ymir, and if you hit a single obstacle, it stuns you while you crash through the next 5. It turns out the weapon on Jotunheim is Mangog, and I don't know, he's a big glowing armor monster, just not the big glowing armor monster from the movie, and he wants to destroy Asgard for reasons, and he kicks Thor into another dimension so he can do so. It turns out that Loki orchestrated the Frost Giant attack and tricked Thor into releasing Mangog so he could defeat it, and I don't know, then people would like him. And Loki's master plan for defeating Mangog is to use the MacGuffin from the movie, the Casket of Eternal Winters. For one, using the casket in the movie is how Loki found out he was a frost giant and started going cuckoo. And for two, how do no alarm bells go off when he pulls this exact same plan again in the actual movie? Thor, meanwhile, is transported to Vanaheim, a high-tech world inhabited by trolls. Well, this shouldn't be a problem. Just explain to them that you're here on accident and that you'd like to get out of their hair as soon as possible, or just immediately start pounding all of them into red paste on sight. Again, our hero, ladies and gentlemen! So now that you've gone from fighting frost giants to high-tech trolls, how does the gameplay evolve to suit the new threat? Some of the enemies have shields, so you point lightning at them and the shield goes away, and that's pretty much it. They get marginally more health that I barely even noticed. They mainly play like reskins of the first several levels. In fact, since the opening levels don't give you cursor lightning to zap and stun all the enemies whenever you want, the start is probably the hardest part of the game. There's a cutscene in here that's confusing, but best as I can figure, Odin once dropped Mangog onto Vanaheim and it started massacring the entire world until the trolls made a weapon that stopped it. They make no effort to imply that the trolls are actually evil, by the way. Our heroes just want to glass the whole planet because they're douchebags. But when you actually get to the machine, it turns out that it's just a transporter and not actually a weapon. I don't know, this is such a blatant set of filler levels that they barely seem to care about. Loki says that to kill Mangog you need the heart of Surtur, that big fiery demon guy that they'd use in Thor Ragnarok. And how OP is Surtur that both his heart and his eyebrows are standalone doomsday weapons?
It's a crown.
But because we're struggling to hit the 4-hour mark, Thor is accidentally sent to Earth instead, because Surtur is invading with an army of demons and breaking off a piece of that Kit Kat planet so he can eat it. And as you fight through legions of demons in a city in flames, civilians repeatedly call for Thor by name, even though, again, this is before the movie, nobody should know who the hell he is! Really feels like the Chitauri invasion in the Avengers should have been small potatoes when you've got Doom Eternal in full swing over here. And how did S.H.I.E.L.D. not know a single damn thing about Thor and all his baggage after this grade A fustercluck? These Earth stages are such blatant filler that even the boss of them goes down with barely a fight.
Surtur has grown more powerful than we had feared, my brother.
Loki.
Surtur is ripping Midgard apart piece by piece and—
Oh, for the love of— This is a pre-rendered cutscene of still images! How are Loki's arms clipped through his shirt? Was nobody paying attention to this? So now you fight demons for several levels. Does the gameplay actually change or evolve? Well, some of the enemies are on fire and don't take damage until you use a new wind attack that does literally nothing else of use. That's pretty much it. So yes, if a bad guy is flaming, the only way past is to blow them. The enemies by this point have so much health that using the red lightning is not a guarantee to kill them, but the combat is still button mashing, just mashing for a little bit longer than you used to. But yeah, all they could think of for a difficulty curve in this thing was to keep jacking up the enemy health and to keep giving the enemies invincibility shields that you need to blow away. Nothing that actually shakes up the game to require new strategies or tactics. Oh, and sometimes you'll need to stand still for a scripted event in the environment to smash something, but enemies won't stop spawning long enough to actually do it. So they give you a wind cage move that just stuns enemies for several seconds at a time with the cursor, basically for this one issue that they invented. The design feels so cheap. Speaking of cheap, there's a lava golem boss that you fight something like 5 or 6 times! It feels like they'll sporadically just shrug off all your hits to where you're never entirely sure how to fight them, and the last one just kept deciding to get huge chunks of his health back. And then you fight Surtur by just doing the hammer throw over and over while he keeps throwing a super laser that I'm pretty sure is impossible to dodge. By Odin's nose has! Well, that does it. Now I know that anybody who fires rays out of a circular hole in their chest is a real asshole. Now, you might think that smashing out Surtur's heart would contradict the plot of Thor Ragnarok, but remember, Thor was surprised to see Surtur still alive in the film, and the dude was really feeble up until the ending. I'm just saying, Taika Waititi is the exact kind of madman to make sure the old video game that nobody played is canon, and to force MCU completionists to play this piece of crap for the whole story. Thor's hammer absorbs Surtur's power or something, and Mjolnir is on fire for the last few levels. It seems to do literally nothing to help you. A rune that you unlock after finishing the game implies that the fire improves your melee damage, but the enemies are balanced such that it's impossible to notice. Apparently Mangog's deal is that he's made of a bunch of pissed off imprisoned souls and he can eat the souls of others to get stronger, so when you get back to Asgard all the enemies are ghosts. Now there's pretty much no feedback whatsoever to let you know that you're actually hitting enemies, and they seem to keep hitting you back out of nowhere. It feels like you just swing at the air that the enemies generally occupy, and just hope that it's registering as damage. Thank crap they only have a single 10-minute level fighting these things before the final boss, because with how abbreviated this ending is, I think they've just given up. And the final boss is... blah. Although I do like how Loki helps by spawning clones of Thor. That's kinda neat.
Mother, the casket! Feel the bite of winter!
You know, in the movie, the casket fire's blue, but here it's green because, oh, green is such an evil color, isn't it?
Thor realizes that his rage nearly got his own people completely wiped out, before completely forgetting this lesson about a week later for the movie. Loki is found out manipulating villains and conspiring against his own people, only for everyone to forget about it a week later for the movie, and Odin realizes that he screwed up Royal by building a genocidal superweapon. Only for him to forget about it for like 8 years or so.
We hope you've enjoyed No Moral Theater.
Thor God of Thunder is not a very good game. The combat system is decent, but wasted on a complete lack of enemy variety. You mash buttons for 4 hours and have annoying bosses that are more than a little trial and error, and that's it. It keeps up an energetic and decent pace without it feeling exhausting like the 2010 Star Trek game, for example, and it's interesting to see how MCU Thor might have gone down a different path of cosmic adventures fighting big-ass demonic threats, but the technicals of the Wii version are complete crap, and if I had to sit through 10 to 12 hours of this like on the high-def version, I'm pretty sure I'd hate this much more. It's not unsalvageable, but I'm glad that I'm doing 2 of these games at once, because apart from mocking how wildly the game diverges from the movies, there's barely anything to talk about with this thing. So let's move on to the more interesting game, Captain America Super Soldier, also for the Wii. The high-def console version of Super Soldier was widely praised as the best of the MCU games, but it kinda had lacking competition because the high-def version of Iron Man was dookie. So let's see how Captain America on the Wii stacks. Oh no! Cap's character model looks awful with ginormous shoulders and short legs that are often bowed out. He just never looks right no matter how long you play the game for. It's kind of funny then to look at the unlockable concept art and see how many deformed caricature looks they went through trying to find a design that wasn't ass. And failing. The game opens with Captain America having a pretty normal battle on the front lines of World War II fighting Hydra goons when he comes across a deadly new Hydra weapon that could forever alter the course of warfare as we know it. A guy with an electric baton! No, really. A guy with a taser scares the shit out of Cap to the point he asks his mission control to try and figure out where such powerfully advanced technology could possibly have come from. Cap is sent to a castle that's been converted into a massive Hydra lab tasked with destroying the base and crippling Hydra's operations before guys with sticks can spread all across Europe. The Allies would be helpless before soldiers with billy clubs, what with their tanks and guns and bombs and mortars. If Star Wars does ever cross over with Marvel, Cap gets one look at TR-8R and shit's gonna go down. Alright, the game is Batman Arkham Asylum if you pulled out all the stealth. You run through levels, you fight lots of dudes, solve some light puzzles with collectathon side quests, and the combat is Arkham Asylum combat. And that's the game. Oh, come on! No stealth encounters with the big, brightly colored striped red, white, and blue costume covered with bright stars? Okay, I see your point. I know I've drawn the comparison before, but for real, this game is just Batman's Arkham combat system. One button to strike, one button to counter, you build combos that trigger special attacks by landing several hits in a row without missing or taking damage. There's even a rhythm to launching attacks like anyone who's played Arkham can tell you. Even some of the combat animations are the same, with this counter right here probably the most glaring and easily pointed to example. Naturally, instead of gadgets, Cap has his indestructible vibranium shield, which has really lame sound effects when it hits things so that this legendary weapon feels weak as all hell. In addition to deflecting bullets and blocking most projectiles, you can slow time to mark targets with your Wii cursor and throw Cap's shield in mid-combat. It even travels through walls when it's thrown, except throwing the shield only briefly stuns certain enemies and doesn't actually deal any damage, because it's not like Cap's shield has ever actually injured someone. Oh. Well, I get it. It's kind of like Arkham's quick-fire Batarang. If the Batarang had to be painstakingly manually aimed using a Wii Remote cursor in the middle of combat that already requires focus.
In the games industry, a serious crime is reported every 12 minutes. Stealing mechanics from Batman is a minor offense I'm willing to let slide.
I'll give them credit that they do an effective job copying the Arkham formula. They even figured out that you need to be able to attack enemies on the ground without losing your combo, while Batman took 4 friggin' games to learn that lesson. And Cap does this funny little bunny hop to kind of tentatively step on a guy when he does so. But the game's counter prompts feel like they don't work right, and often you don't give you enough time to block hits. Like, you usually don't see the counter prompt until after you've started launching an attack. And that's all before the enemies that don't have counter prompts at all, so they train you to watch out for telegraphed hits and then bitch slap you out of nowhere. The big problem with the combat is that the game has a lot of special enemies. Assassins are immune to all attacks, can't be countered, and are only vulnerable for a few seconds after you hit them with the shield. The Shock Trooper is immune to all attacks and is only vulnerable if you land a quick counter. The Plasma Gun soldiers will constantly fire lasers at you that can't be reflected and lop off huge chunks of your health, and they have tons of hit points to boot. Berserkers also lop off huge chunks of your health, like to spam untelegraphed invincible charging attacks at close range, and will take away your shield if you try to use it. The Panzer mechs, because yes, the Nazis have giant robots in World War II, are immune to all damage, fire a constant volley of bombs that knock you back, and can only be killed by getting a bomb stuck to your shield and throwing it at them so the bomb explodes, and then you have a very brief window to damage them. Individually, they don't sound that bad. Except as soon as a new enemy type is introduced, you can expect to see pretty much all of them mixed into pretty much every combat encounter from that point onward. Suddenly, you've got shock troopers and assassins charging you immune to most damage while trying to block a hailfire of plasma shots, made worse by how the AI basically has all the enemies bum rush you at once, with several enemies that are baseline immune to attacks almost constantly in your face. On a repeat playthrough though, I didn't have too much of a problem with the combat, probably because Berserkers don't come in until level 6 and mechas at level 7 out of 9. And while plenty of fights are annoying and feel unbalanced, they don't get really dickish until the last 2 levels, and by then I'd stumbled across a secret that makes the combat exponentially easier. As you play, you gain experience to purchase upgrades, which are sorted into 3 categories: the shield for minor buffs to your throws, attacks for minor buffs so you can get a large combo, or focus to increase the number of targets you can lock onto with the shield at once. Pump all your upgrades into focus, because eventually it lets you seriously juice up your health bar. It's clear the game was not balanced at all around the health upgrades, and it makes the combat vastly easier. So you won't mind so much when they keep throwing in berserkers that take away your shield alongside enemies that require you to use the freaking shield! Seriously, a fight with 2 berserkers and 2 mechs at once, I'm not sure how I won. 2 of the enemies just kinda gave up and died, it seemed like. Doogie! 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 Unfortunately, though, the just kinda passable combat is pretty much all the game has to offer. You get puzzles that almost exclusively boil down to manipulating turrets into shooting fuse boxes, or some platforming where all the jumps are made for you so that the only difficulty comes from trying to figure out where you're supposed to go. They're so rudimentary that they don't add squat to the game. So in spite of the combat, which they screwed up just enough to suck a lot of the fun out, the game gets dull and repetitive. You don't have the immersion of the Arkham games either, since the environments are just bland, endless, generic Hydra labs versus the varied Asylum environments dripping in ominous atmosphere, mood, lighting, and menace. The camera is also a constant pain, often swerving off to the side like the cameraman is drunk so you have to keep moving it back yourself, and the camera and levels are designed so that enemies can charge at you from off-screen and blindside you. The first time I played, I ran into a game-breaking bug where Cap kept falling through a pole that I needed to cross to finish a level. All these years later, and I think in the exact same room, It happened again and got caught on video this time. And no, I'm not missing this jump. Notice the arrow that appears right before I try to make it? That means that Cap should make this jump automatically. Reloaded a checkpoint and it worked perfectly the first time. The real weakness to the game, though, is that there's next to no storyline connecting the levels, so the whole thing feels like a slog. Yeah, they go through a solid chunk of Cap's rogues gallery like Arkham does, but in Arkham, you have a big overarching plot of the Joker creating monsters to conquer the city as constant connective tissue. Here you just kind of randomly bum around a castle for 4 hours. Although it might be funny to compare all the Cap villains that they busted out in this game only to have wildly different versions in the movies this is supposed to be canon with.
I'm David Pumpkins, and I am your guide through these vast new realities. Come with me and ponder the question, what if?
Upon arriving at the castle, you're greeted by Baron von Strucker, who, well, that's a softball. Dude created Quicksilver and the Scarlet Witch, then died having not done jack shit. He spends 2 levels sending goons to fight Captain America, and then you fight him in level 3, where he uses a wussy metal hand that barely does anything to try and fight you. Try being the operative word.
My wussy metal hand, as you call it, is an advanced computerized weapon.
And then he dies by punching machinery.
Yes, it's because you're stupid.
The explosion knocks out Cap and he wakes up in a prison held by Madame Hydra. Okay, she's trickier. They kind of had a Madame Hydra on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but that was just a rogue LMD and I think was only in a virtual world. But I hear that maybe Julia Louis-Dreyfus is Madame Hydra. Regardless, she just puts Cap through a bunch of tests instead of, killing him.
Yes, it's because you're stupid.
Though admittedly, there's kind of a cool stretch where you don't have the shield for a good chunk of a level, then you get it back and go back through rooms where you needed the shield to cross platforming elements. And then you fight Madame Hydra in level 5, and the fight is insanely easy. Just block everything with the shield and try not to fall into the lava that exists for some reason. Then Dr. Zola, the dwarf-looking guy from the movie, has Cap's most recognizable friends captured, is trying to synthesize the super soldier serum from his blood, and wants to test it on Bucky. Why not? Wouldn't be the first time. Or the second. Jeez, what is it about Bucky that makes people want to jab him all full of needles? You spend 2 levels saving Cap's friends, and then the Red Skull, Cap's mortal arch-enemy, finally decides to show his face to pick up the super soldier serum, only to immediately run away because plot armor. Instead, you fight a guy in an armored suit called the Iron Cross, technology that fascinates Howard Stark because, get it, Iron Man's dad!
I must say, I find the technology fascinating.
Yeah, the technology fascinates me too, because how the hell do the Nazis have lasers, shields, automated turrets, robots, and glowing laser energy balls that continue to home in on you after they're deflected in World War II? And all of this tech is colored green instead of blue, meaning none of this is being powered by the Tesseract like it is in the movie. Hydra just had all this shit before they found an Infinity Stone. Actually, they kind of explained that. Apparently, this is Baron Zemo's castle, and he invented all this plasma ray shit and then got betrayed by Hydra, and he's only present in the game as a radio voice asking you to salvage his castle and relics. Yeah, Zemo would have actually shown up for the game, but he was busy. And by busy, I mean he was moving to Sokovia, where he's actually from in the movies. You'd think the Iron Cross would be a cool boss, but all you do is dodge and block all his attacks until he tries flying, then damage him with quick-time events. Points for variety, but it's kinda just running in circles until he decides to let you damage him. Red Skull blows up the castle with missiles, so, big help it was doing that side quest where you take out bombs so the castle can't be self-destructed. But the Allies somehow get thermal scans that existed in World War II of something big underneath the castle, so Cap has to go back in.
None of us are special. If we win, that'll be why. Because Zola and Skull think there's some kind of master race, and we know we're not. We know no man is more valuable than any other. We know it'll take all of us to stop this evil from spreading. All of us standing together, doing our part.
Okay, that was a damn good speech. Kudos. Yeah, this sci-fi tech alien mothership looking level is totally all a Hydra laboratory that could have existed in World War II. The Nazis from Wolfenstein would call bullshit on this. I like that the final boss hammers home that despite being a superhero, Cap's true strength is as a leader as he coordinates a full team into battle. It's about the only thing I like about the final boss. So yeah, Zola was somehow able to digitize his brain into computers in the 40s, and the final boss is a giant robot being psychically controlled, complete with energy shields that can block bombs. Again, in World War II. I'm starting to think the Tesseract was just slowing them down in the movie. This final boss is not good. You fight goons, then fight them again if you got shot by a friggin' storm of lasers, and then they have another Berserker mech suit combo just to piss in your soup. Then Zola starts firing a laser that you have to move between pieces of cover to dodge in a really infuriating stretch copying the Arkham Scarecrow bits, including a blind jump more or less hoping that an off-screen laser doesn't hit you by pure luck. And the graphics aren't exactly top-notch, with the laser kind of popping in and out of existence. So yeah, this part sucked! But you destroy the robot, capping the invaders right into the sunset, and the villains with movie plot immunity get away.
I trust you have had your fun, Zola. Now stop wasting time on failed projects.
Yeah, joke's on you, asshole! Zola gets away, reforms Hydra, and nearly leads them to take over the world, and you spend the next 80 years guarding a rock! Once you finish the game, you unlock a crappy Ultimate Universe skin. You can get the classic Captain America suit, but you're not told how. I'm guessing it pertains to the Zola challenges, which are additional unlockables that I think you can get if you go back through the levels a second time. But the thing about the Zola challenges is, I don't care! Your only reward for the Collectathon side quest is more concept art, and after a while they just started filling out said unlockable art with shot after shot after shot of boxes! So yeah, I'm done. Captain America Super Soldier is just okay. Competent but repetitive combat that has bouts of being unbalanced, otherwise lacking gameplay, copying a popular game with a lot of pieces missing to where it just doesn't have near the same magic. Not being torturously bad or egregiously cheap is a major step up from the other MCU tie-in games, but yeah, Iron Man on the Wii is way better. So my thoughts were a little more positive than the first go-around, but more importantly, I have updated and more comprehensive reviews for this and Thor. That is a weight off my YouTubing conscience.
And hell, at the very least it was nice to play something different after so damn many Sonic the Hedgehog games. The simulation is failing! It's getting interference! That shouldn't be possible! Blast! How are we going to have the 200th episode next time without a host? I just know this is the dog and everybody's fault!
I am many things.